Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. I am here with the incredible, amazing, wonderful co-host, Juanita, Wootton, Radko. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Kim. Oh my goodness, I'm blushing.
I think she likes doing these episodes with me because I just tell her how great she is.
What's not to like about that?
So today we want to talk about starting in 2022, your year off strong. And one of the ways that you can do that is by learning how to sell. I was having a conversation on Clubhouse this morning, and we were talking about the fact that if you do not know how to sell, you don't have a business, you have a hobby. And I remember the first time someone said that to me, because basically I had a hobby. I wasn't making any money. And I really wanted to punch the person out because I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur. It's like, show me the money, honey. And it's like, okay, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And it's hard, right? Because you have this great product or you have this great service, you have a desire to help people. But if you can't sell that, then you really don't have a business. And that is frustrating because most of us do not get into entrepreneurship to sell. I know it sounds really weird, but we don't. Like, I know when you had the sewing machine shop, did you take over the sewing machine shop because you wanted to sell?
And my first reason for becoming interested in the business was more for the teaching aspect and the potential for designing projects. I am really fortunate that Husqvarna had such a strong training program, because by the time I was ready to take over the business, I did have a sales mindset at that point. But when I first joined the business, that was not what I imagined it to be,
Well, I think every entrepreneur's goal is to make money, but we just don't think about, this process or this 4-letter S word that we have to do to get the money in.
It feels like it should somehow be organic. It's touching on that if you build it, they will come kind of idea a bit. But I think there's a great book called The E-Myth. And one of the things
I've read that
the book discusses is how when you're really good at something like baking pies, everybody says, oh, you should own a pie baking business. You should own a bakery. And the skill set that you have for the business is manufacturing pies, not selling pies.
Or running a business, because there's
running. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you're so right there. And I think that's one of the traps that we fall into as entrepreneurs is we've got these skills, talents, and abilities, but most times those are not necessarily business building skills, talents, and abilities that we have. Those are things that you have to learn as you go along. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast today, because I wanted to talk about, having those sales conversations that convert your leads into clients or customers. Now, this works particularly well in high-end products or more of a service based industries. So not necessarily talking about, having a e-commerce shop.
Right.
Or selling products necessarily online. This is more of the one-to-one touch. So that's why I wanted to have that conversation, because, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're especially a professional speaker or coach, a lot of your selling is going to be done in that one-to-one environment. So how do you do it effectively? And so we have 5 points that we want to talk about today. And we might extend this into 2 episodes. We'll just see how long the conversation goes for here. So 1, maybe 2 episodes on this. But let me just quickly tell you what those 5 points are. So, most of your conversation should be about listening. So counterintuitive to how we've been taught how to do things. 2 is about asking questions. 3 is about providing value. 4 is about your body language. And 5 is about doing test close. So just before we get into it, do you have any thoughts you want to share with us there, Juanita?
This is a great setup. I think we have a lot to cover here, Kim. I'm looking forward to discussing it. I like the way that you've organized it, so I'm just ready to jump in.
Okay. So point number 1 is most of the conversation should be about listening. And when I say that, even in my brain, it's going, no, you got to tell people, you got to talk about your products, you got to talk about your services, you've got to get them to listen. If you just tell them about your products and services, they're going to buy. And again, to me, that's more like what you were talking about, if you build it, they will come type attitude. And when I was learning how to sell, thankfully, I had one kind of advantage in this area is I'm very relational. Mm-hmm. So I love talking and listening to people in the first place. Now, I have to admit, there have been times in my life I like to talk more than I like to listen. Sorry, my friend, I've done that to you a few times.
I will say that it's a growth. It's a place where you've had some growth. Yes. How about that?
But when I first started RTI publishing, I came to realize that the more I listened, the more I sold. And that was a tremendous revelation for me. Here's the reason why. We talk about on Author to Authority podcasts a lot about authority marketing. One of the easiest ways to position yourself as authority is to give away your right to speak first. When you are so comfortable and confident in yourself that you can let the other person talk as much as they want and it doesn't bother you, you don't have to say anything, that comes across to the person who is actually speaking. And they are kind of like, wow, I'm not sensing any pressure from this person. This person really cares about me. What are some of your thoughts there, Juanita?
I really enjoy entering a conversation with someone and learning something that's unique about them. And that's one of the key points of this sort of listening, is that you need to listen to understand what's going on with this person, find out what they're passionate about, find out where their problems are. Boy, if you ever want to get somebody to open up, ask them what their problem is with X, the problem that you already have a solution for. Sometimes you can pave the way a little. Excuse me. Sometimes you can pave the way with the question. One of my pocket questions when I was talking to customers, potential sewing machine owners, would be, what kind of sewing do you like to do? And I might meet someone who's a quilter, and so they say, oh, I love sewing quilts. Or someone would say, well, I don't know, I'm just a beginner. Or occasionally I'd meet someone who would say, oh, all kinds, which, if I'm being honest, Kim, it's a lie. Nobody likes all kinds, really. They do have some that they like a little bit more. And maybe they haven't considered the question a bit. So if you have some questions that help you qualify your customer and understand how you can sort of categorize them. I think in my instance, if someone said they were a quilter, I would show them a different sewing machine than the person who said, I love to sew clothes, or the person who said, well, I just use it when it's an emergency situation and I need to mend my husband's pants. Uh, those are three different types of sewers, and one is more enthusiastic than the other. Definitely the one sewing her husband's pants does not want the super duper fancy schmancy. She's like, show me the one that makes it the easiest and I can be done the fastest.
Exactly.
So that kind of, you should be prepared for those kinds of questions or those kinds of categories.
Mhm.
And as you gather the information from someone, you're going to go, okay, this person needs my plan A solution, but it sounds like she could be interested in the silver option, or maybe even the gold package might not be a stretch for this particular person if I dig a little deeper and find out where they see themselves. Sometimes you have to uncover what somebody is dreaming, not what they tell you about here and now.
Yes.
You have to think of, you have to go deep enough in your question, in your conversation, to do more than just listen to a problem and go, well, here, I know you've got a problem that's and I've got a hammer, so there everything is a nail. It's not one size fits all.
Well, when you were talking about that, I like how you mentioned about listening to understand. And, you talked about the different sewing machines. So when I came to you, not only did you, because I was mostly going to do clothing, you're like, okay, Kim, yeah, you definitely need a sewing machine, but maybe you also want to consider a serger, because a serger is going to make your sewing clothes experience a whole lot better. And you sold me the serger and I made something on it. I'm like drooling down the side of my mouth. I'm like, I want this machine. Now it took a bit, and my family worked hard and saved up for me and put money down on it for me so that I could get this serger. So thank you. And even though I'm not sewing clothes right now, actually it was funny. I was down in my craft area in my basement, and my sewing machine and the serger are underneath the table right now. And I kind of looked at them and I went, I haven't sewn in a long time and I haven't serged in a long time. And I was thinking, you know what, not right now, because I got a lot on my plate, but I was thinking, maybe cut out some time this summer just to, make some clothes and do some things and explore that again. So it was kind of like, ooh, yeah, I kind of forgot they were there, right? So maybe it'll be a summer project when I take some vacation. But one thing you talked about was listening to understand, and I think that's really important. Now we're going to get to more in this in the second point, asking questions. But one thing you forgot to talk about was the fact that I helped Juanita out in her store long before I did RTI publishing. I helped her out for a while there. And she would also ask what, especially a quilter, what was the most frustrating thing about quilting?
Yes.
And oh boy, that question opened up amazing conversation. But Juanita would listen. She would listen for specific things, because she generally already knew, what problems quilters have. And that's the thing, when you're selling, you need to understand what problems are your client customer facing. Mm-hmm. When I talk to clients about publishing books, there's always, 2 or 3 main areas that pretty well everything they talk to me about comes down to. One, they don't know how to write a book. So that includes they don't know who to write to, what to write about, all those kinds of things. Second is the time. Mm-hmm. And then third, in terms of hiring someone to do it, is the money. So those are the big 3. So I know that just about every frustration or problem they have usually comes down to one of those three areas. So that helps me to be able to address it. Now, when people are talking, they may have specific things. We have one client who's dyslexic, right? So that is a serious issue that we have to deal with to be able to help this person successfully get their book. And, in some ways, this person has disqualified himself because of the dyslexia. And we're like, no, that's not a problem. Like, that's why we're here. He has incredible skills, knowledge, talents, abilities. But when it comes to physically writing and reading, there's some problems that need to be dealt with. So, when you listen, to understand, and I think, one of the things I had written down in our notes is listen to understand, not to respond.
Absolutely.
Because I think sometimes when we get in sales mode, we're not listening to understand, we're listening to what they're saying so we can try and overcome it and convince them to buy our products and services.
Yes, I know I've been guilty of that in the past.
I have too. I try not to be, though.
It's one of those things when you're passionate about the topic, sometimes that is what you can be in danger of doing, is that when you hear them say, oh, well, I'm thinking about getting into I'm thinking about getting into sewing. Oh, well, I have a great top of the line machine that you might want to buy.
Yeah.
If you're not listening to understand, then you might jump to that without qualifying to that high-end sale without properly qualifying your customer and ending up losing the sale because they're turned off by that steamroller approach. And this kind of dovetails in with your next point, that you're listening because you truly care about the person and want what's best for them. Going to your top of the line tells the client that they are not your priority. Whatever's in their wallet is your priority, and you don't really care about what's best for them. And that can be a hard realization for a lot of people, but I empathize. We all want to be able to go out for a fancy dinner. Well, that's a bad example right now, but we'd all like to be able to fill our grocery cart, right? So
Juanita and I live in Ontario, Canada, and as of yesterday, we are back in lockdown. So no eating. Okay, you can take out, you can deliver, you can go through the drive-through, but you are not eating in any restaurant right now, at least for the next few weeks, as Omicron just kind of wipes through Ontario. Something you were saying there when you're talking about being passionate, the other side of that coin is when you're being desperate.
Yes.
Because you desperately need that money. And so you're trying to, listen to respond to try and overcome objections so that you can get the sale. So, that's the other side of the coin, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in number 4, which is body language. So the last point that we want to talk about here, and I think we'll probably only maybe get through 1 and 2, Juanita. I suspect this is going to be a 2-parter today.
Well, that never happens with us, does it?
No, never. But the last point that I had sent to Juanita for today was listen to determine if you want to work with this person.
So important. I have a question from this. How do you tell? I have my own thoughts on how I could tell, but how do you know whether you want to work with this person? This is where desperation sometimes makes you deaf to or blind to red flag things. So I almost feel like that could be its own little podcast, is some red. How about we put a pin in this. Red flags, red flags for potential clients that will be potential headaches. We'll have to think on the workshop that title a bit better, but
Yeah. Well, let's throw out a few ideas now, and maybe we'll do that as an episode for the end of February, beginning of March. So there's things that you can listen for. First of all, morally or ethically. So I'll give you an example. You know, as a godly person, there's certain topics that I would not want to write about or glorify. You know, to me, glorifying killing people is not something I want to represent. Glorifying racism or genderism or, you know, any of those things is not something that I want to represent. So if I'm talking to a person and I'm asking about their story, you know, what would they potentially want to write about? You know, I had a situation a couple of years ago where a gentleman was a lawyer and he had represented people, you know, who had killed, you know, who were heavily into the drug sexual trade scene. And he wanted to write about how he defended these people and got them off. Now, don't get me wrong. I think, you know, under our legal system, everybody has the right to representation. So that's not what I'm talking about here. But it was the way that he was talking about it and how he glorified the fact that he was trying to change the laws so that these people could do bad things and get away with them.
Yeah, that's definitely, I'm glad you dodged that. We dodged that bullet there with something like that. One of the ethical issues that I'd often notice would be every year without fail around Christmas, I'd get 2 or 3 husbands who suddenly had a brainwave that this would be the year they'd buy their wife a sewing machine, and they always wanted to knock off the sales tax. What can you do if I give you cash? What price can you pay me? I'm like, this is the price, because the government will come after me if I'm not charging the sales tax that I'm supposed to, and you'll be gone, and I will not ever it'll be a much bigger headache for me than it will for you. And sometimes I lost a potential sale from that, but I did not incur the headache of trying to do that, because the clients who want to do that to you
Sort of under the table.
It always seems to snowball, like well, you did this for me the last time, why can't you do this?
Yeah.
It's never just one.
Yeah. So we talked about ethical, but here's sort of that other side of the coin that you're kind of talking about there is, when you're having these sales conversations and you start to discuss things, is the client already trying to add things in that are not part of your package and they want it for free? Right?
Yes,
we need to remember we had that one massively headache client who, every time we turned around wanted more stuff for free.
Yes, I remember that.
And you and I were stressed out to the gills, because she wanted everything better and faster. She wanted herself to be the priority at the absolute lowest price.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually got to the point, we got about I think 96% of the project done, and we just couldn't take it anymore. We got her to a point where she could finish everything off herself. And we finally said, that's it, we're done. We're firing you, because the stress that you and I were under wasn't worth it. No. So, you want clients. Now, don't get me wrong. It's okay to throw in a freebie or something to your clients, but when they already starting to kind of, tell you that they want more for less, that's going to be going on all the way through. And when you say no to them, then they get very angry, snippety.
Yeah, those are the bad boyfriend, bad girlfriend kind of kind of clients. You know, everybody, you can't judge somebody by their relationship status, but I'm just going to say that it is a thought that you maybe want to think about how how they interact in relationships, and whether they're trying to always seek an advantage. It's built in, they're going to always be seeking an advantage with you, and they're not caring about a win-win situation.
Yeah.
So I was thinking maybe we should move along. Any other reasons why we might not want to work with this person? Again, this is kind of related to the scope creep, is that you might not want to work with someone who has a poor understanding of what your capabilities are. And that can turn into scope creep. It can also lead to you over promising when they say, well, I want to book, but I'd also like it to be, I'd like to have it be a coffee table book, a picture book. And we start off from a place of, okay, we can do this and this and this. And especially if we've begun a process and then halfway through they come up with an idea of, well, why don't we turn it into
this or this?
They're changing the project concept on a very large level. And if you have had this thing of scope creep a little bit all the way through, you start off being able to do things, and then they get to the point where they ask for something that is out of your skill set.
Yeah.
We don't have professional photographers on staff to do like glam shots of your little Angora sweaters that you knitted out of your cat's fur, like, that would be a very niche book anyway. Also an itchy kind of sweater, I think. Anyhow.
Well, and I think too, like, when you're having this sales conversation, so I'll give you an example. I was talking to someone yesterday who we are potentially going to collaborate with. And we were talking about the book publishing process. And he's like, what's your normal time range? I'm like, 9 to 12 months. And depending on the client, sometimes it's gone up to 18 months, right? Because a lot of it's on the client side. And he's like, well, could you get a book done in 4 months? And I said, no. And he's like, you can't? Nope. Those are not the type of books we do. We do high quality books. We are not slapping something together in 4 months just so a person can name themselves an author. Those are not the kind of books we do. Now, are there people who can slap a book together in 4 months? Sure. We're just not one of them. Nor will we be one of them.
That makes me think of the idea of, well, can't you do it faster? Well, you can microwave a pizza pocket in like 2 minutes or less. Or you could have a meal which takes 45 minutes to an hour to prepare. Which one is more satisfying, right?
Exactly. Right. So, I mean, that's something else too. It's not just even the scope creep, but the timeline. If you've clearly spelled out the timeline, and before you've even sold the person on it, they're trying to push you into, doing something. So if your process takes 9 months to a year, like ours does, to create a quality product, and, someone's pushing, well, can you do it in 6? Can you do it in 7? And it's like, no, and I'm not going to say yes just so we could get a client in, because that whole process is going to be rushed. It's going to be hurried. Mistakes are going to be made. The client's going to be frustrated. Then we're going to be frustrated. I'm going to be stressed out. And then you're going to be looking at me going, Kim, you're stressing me out. Right. So,
Yeah.
even from the beginning, if someone's constantly pushing, like if you're in the sales process and they're constantly pushing about timeline, pushing about quality, pushing about things, then that's a big red flag to me about whether I want to work with someone or not. Because if they're doing this before we even get into the process, it's only become more once they send me money.
Absolutely. And as you were saying that, it made me think of, I believe it's the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be the 20%er who makes you, who gives you 80% of your headache. And what I found with clients like that, especially with the timeline thing, would be that they'd be enough of a headache, enough of a pain that you think, okay, well, fine, I'm just gonna, I'll slide my loyal customer who doesn't hassle me, I'll move them down a rung because I can get rid of Mrs. Toothache faster if I just get her out of my hair. And so that's a danger thing of your better customers can suffer because of a client like this. I definitely think we might want to expand on this thought into another one, because that's one of those things that really,
it's important.
It costs you a great deal down the road if you end up damaging your relationship with one of your loyal customers.
So true. Okay, well, we are actually kind of a little over our time here, so don't want to go too much longer, but you're right. Let's put that in the books. Juanita, since you're the planner note taker, can you make a note that will be our topic for our next series of podcasts, 1 or 2? We'll see how the discussion goes. So I'm going to close this down here, but come back for our next episode together, because we are going to try to cover, we only covered 1 out of 5 today. So let's see, Juanita, if we cover the other.
Well, at least 2 the next one.
In the next podcast. So this might turn out to be a little bit longer series than what we thought. But anyway, this has been Kim Thompson Pinder and Juanita Wootton Radko on the Author to Authority podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the very next episode. Bye now.
Bye.